Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles, and welcome to Family Office TV. And for my members, I'm the founder of SFO Continuity. I am doing something unique today. I did a variation of it with Jamie McLaughlin on family office issues over the summer, and I got approached by a good friend of mine who I have great respect for, who's very intellectual, and I have a lot to learn from him. But I probably am going to disagree on certain things that we're going to talk about. So we agreed to do what we're calling a family office debate on Europe, DEI, the economy, a little bit of the election. It features a very special guest that I'm very fortunate to have on, Giovanni de Francisci. Giovanni, I'll start by welcoming you to the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And to give the audience a little bit of context, Giovanni is a European elegant gentleman. He represents from his heritage a multi-generational family in Europe, and he's the portfolio manager for his single family office. Again, it's great to have you on. We're going to do this, I guess you could say, a little more structured than the family office debate that I did this summer to make it a little bit engaging and fast moving for the audience. We're going to do the best we could on focusing in on 3, possibly 4 subjects. Those have been agreed to and predetermined by me and Giovanni. And we're going to try to stick to 3 minutes of an open, 3 minutes of a rebuttal or commentary, and then 6 minutes of back and forth. We may extend a pinch beyond that, depending on a bunch of factors, but we do want to keep this fast-paced and going. Both Giovanni and I are probably a little bit on the come on, he's fully Italian, I'm half Italian. We could go on for hours. So this is a little bit of a challenge for both of us. We probably won't be perfect in it. And again, I think the role of debate is, and this is the challenge now that we're noticing in this country, having differences of opinions and not openly discussing them, not listening to the other side, and not realizing that we're not perfect. We don't know everything as new information comes in, or how we process the information that could cause us to change our mind. And I think this is a learning process. In many ways, I actually would prefer to lose as long as I learn. So on that note, I am going to take the first lead. And I actually have a clock audience. I'm going to do the best I could. I'm not going to cheat and put it in 4 minutes. I'm going to take 3 minutes. And here we go. The first subject is DEI, its impact in academia, government, and business, and why this matters for family offices. I believe in equal opportunity, not equal outcomes. I believe in meritocracy. I am less worried about splitting the pie, and in today's world, more worried that we're going to have a pie to even split. I'm a believer in don't ask for an easy life. Ask for the strength to persevere. I know this is going to be a tough comment for some of you. Suffering allows for greatness. It actually is an opportunity. I'm half minority. I'm half Puerto Rican. I grew up in squalor in a welfare home. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be called names from not being like everyone else in my community. You never win. Never. I've been in the family office world for decades from nothing. I know thousands of families. You don't win by playing the victim. That puts you in a perpetual state of seeking mercy. If I have time in my 3 minutes, I'll get a little bit of that. And that doesn't set you up to overcome. I'm an advocate of weak people think the world is against them. Strong people may agree that it is, and they don't care. They just move forward. When you want to succeed as badly as you want to breathe, it has to be that strong inside you, especially if you have to overcome. Then you'll be successful. I want the most qualified people to win when I go to a neurologist, when I go on an air flight. I want the best of the best. And I think that's good. That's a level of competition. And life isn't fair. Life isn't perfectly an egalitarian society. It's you need to rise to the top. Now, I do agree. You may question me on, okay, I'll kind of agree with you, Angelo, but you did state equal opportunity. Does everyone have an equal opportunity? The sad answer is no. And this reflects to some of the things that I spoke about earlier. When it comes to something like admission to college, which is not life or death, like the other examples I described, I agree with you. We may need to have a little bit of flexibility relative to, well, this person in this zip code didn't have the same level of tutoring or this or that. So there is going to be a level of being subjective and objective, and I don't have the perfect answer for that. The US, here in the US, we've always been optimistic. We rebelled against the greatest empire on earth to form, quote unquote, our country. Fairness is treating everyone the same without exception. And mercy is wanting to be treated differently, which inherently to me is discriminatory in its purpose. I had much more to say, but we heard the alarm go off. And on that note, I am going to kick it to Giovanni for his 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
Well, first of all, I'm supposing that you disagree with DEI. Is that correct? You don't agree with DEI?
I mean, we should be saving that for our 6 minutes of open dialogue.
Oh.
But yes, my perspective is that I absolutely do not believe in DEI. I believe in meritocracy.
Okay. Well, in your opening 3 minutes, I didn't see what the harm was to DEI, but let's just look at the DEI causes. So I'll just narrow it down to, let's say, college admissions, and I will take an extreme, unpopular perspective of DEI, which would say affirmative action. So if I wanted to win this debate, I wouldn't grant you the weapon with which to hit me over the head with, okay? So affirmative action in college admissions and in municipal employment is beneficial to society. Meritocracy is not all there is in a hiring decision. So let's say firemen, police, government employees. I do believe that the unintended consequences of meritocracy would be that those applicants that score the highest on the civil service exam would get the job, and that may probably historically has resulted in an employment force of a government that does not represent the constituency of that government. So if a city is minority Black, let's say Atlanta, it would be inappropriate and not beneficial. It'd be harmful to the citizens and residents of Atlanta if 60% of Atlanta were Black and 80% of the police force were white. So I do believe that the police force, the fire department should reflect the ethnic makeup of the community, so long as all those police and firemen meet not just the basic, but comfortably clear the minimum requirements in a civil service exam. So if no ethnic minority can pass the minimum requirements of a civil service exam, then they should not be hired, quite simply.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to set it to 6 minutes and we'll have a little bit of a back and forth. Again, I think we ended up probably agreeing in certain ways and maybe not so much in others. I agree with you when I look at a community likely reflected, I would say, in its teachers and a police force probably is that it represents a equitable split relative to that population. Now, others on both the left or right may disagree with me and disagree with you on that, and that's okay. I'm not looking to placate to either side, either the left or the right. I just very strongly feel that DEI is incredibly negative. We're seeing it in academia, where it's incredibly left-leaning and woke. We're seeing it.
Give me examples of that harm. You mentioning the harm doesn't tell me what the harm is. What is the harm in DEI?
Well, I could think of a variety of things. Look at President Gray from Harvard and how that played out going back to last fall, where that was obviously a DEI hire. The issue that I would have, and specifically in academia, is the impact it has on young, impressionable minds, implying that you don't need merit, that we're making up for quote unquote past wrongs, and we're giving you an edge and an advantage, which is not teaching the principles that I spoke about in my open. Now, that would lead to deeper issues relative to the economy and relative to the workforce. And you can't tell me, even though I get it, I'm unique being a little bit split in terms of my cultural heritage. But I have many people that I know that tell me, Angelo, trust me, you do not want to be an over 50-year-old white male that is maybe not incredibly top 1%, that is looking for a job at this point. And I think that's sad. Okay. Has there been injustices to others in the past? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's terrible. And it shouldn't be that way. But there has been. All we can do is move forward. DEI is not beneficial at all, in my opinion.
Okay. Stop it, Mariposa. Sorry about that.
I have a Cane Corso, an Italian dog, so I understand, okay. Giovanni.
You've mentioned one harm of DEI, which is the Harvard University president. I don't think that proves your point that DEI is harmful. She resigned from being president of Harvard because she had an embarrassing congressional hearing where she equivocated on the issue of Israel and Palestine and shutting down student protests within her campus, at least, regarding the Palestinian issue. So the fact that she resigned does not prove that DEI is harmful. In any case,
being very narrow to picking out the situation with Gay, that's her name. I'm talking more specifically about the indoctrination, which is very left-leaning and very much into the principles of woke, which relates to DEI is good. And it's not good from the perspectives that I know. It doesn't reward that extra effort. It doesn't reward meritocracy. When it comes to entrance into something that may not be impacting my health, like I gave the neurological example, I agree there needs to be a little bit of subjectivity relative to the solution. I don't have a great answer for what that's going to look like, because that could also be unfair. We looked at how unfair it was in Ivy League admissions to a lot of people of Asian heritage.
Well, it was only unfair to kids of Asian heritage in that they statistically scored on average better than other ethnicities, and thus not the most highest scoring applicants to these universities were getting in. That is because the universities did not want to end up with a composition of a student body that did not reflect society as a whole. So making decisions solely based on meritocracy leads to other problems worse than the problem that DEI is solving. In any case, what you call indoctrinating is in fact just educating, because all education is indoctrination. So you call it indoctrination, I'm just going to call it educating. Educating students in school, college, even programs within the office to raise awareness of diverse opinions, cultures, values, is beneficial for the group, the school group, the college group, the employment group. You call it being woke. Woke merely means being aware of the cultural differences and the potential harms of ethnocentricity in your everyday interactions with people around you. So, to be very clear, DEI is only raising awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The harms that you are really talking about, which harm meritocracy, is affirmative action, redressing the harms of past wrongs. That is what you're really talking about. You're opposed to affirmative action. I would say that you are, in fact, quite open to DEI. You're not against DEI.
No, I would say you're wrong, but let's each get 30 seconds to kind of close our point.
Okay.
I believe a great society is built when the most gifted are encouraged because of meritocracy to contribute. Equality doesn't win wars. It does not build great economies. Persuasive in America is a level of freedom and individual rights where it's based on meritocracy. Do I and maybe others have it harder? But does that strengthen us and make us strong in our faith and our family and the opportunity of doing better? Do I need to go to Harvard? Do I need to go to Yale to be successful? No, I don't. But should I be unfairly treated from a variety of other perspectives relative to that? But again, I want to be honest to my 30 seconds. I'll give you the final word.
When I said that I think that you're for DEI, when you said to me that we may be rather similar, I was just agreeing with you that I think we are in fact rather similar. DEI does not harm meritocracy because in a free market economy, people make decisions to consume products and services however they wish. That's not to say that employment and college cannot take into consideration diversity and equity in their decisions.
Okay, let's move on now, Giovanni, to the second of the subjects that we'll discuss. This one you'll be taking the initial lead on. We'll call it broadly fiscal and monetary policy. And with your okay, as we may have learned a lesson in the first subject, why don't we extend from 3 minutes to 4 minutes? So I'm adjusting the clock now, and okay. You are on the clock.
Okay. I am very concerned about conservative fiscal policy. None of conservative fiscal policy has borne out to be beneficial to society. Trickle-down economics and the Laffer curve did not stimulate the U.S. economy. Quantitative easing has not brought about inflation, whilst it did. Well, that's why I wanted to show graphs. If you look at how rates of inflation since 2007 and 8 until now, they mimic when the price of energy goes up, and they do not track QE1, QE2, QE3, or twist or tightening. So if the printing of money and or the restricting of money does not seem in historical charts, does not track the inflation rate, then we must argue that they are uncorrelated. The printing of money and the restricting of money are uncorrelated in the impact it has on inflation. And then if you place inflation over the price of energy, you see that they track. So thus one would lead to the conclusion that inflation is caused by the absence or scarcity of oil and its impacts on the price of energy. I'm fine.
Okay, that was very concise. You are very efficient. I had to set the clock back to 0. And I think I'm going to be relatively equally as concise as well, but technically I'll give myself the 4 minutes. So I obviously, per my facial expressions, I guess you could say I disagree, at least in the summary that you gave. If we were to have an hour to sit down, have a glass of beer or wine, we may end up being a little bit more in the center relative to that than what we thought. We have a $35 trillion deficit in this country. Money printing, money printing, money printing. It's ridiculous. Look at the debt service, well over $1 trillion. We don't have the tax revenues relative to our social service programs and military. What's going to happen with that debt service if we continue down the trajectory that we're doing now? We're looking at $10 trillion in a couple of years. Now, might we have the advent of enhanced GDP through AI, through initiatives happening in robotics which could relate to it? Yes, that might be helpful. We shall see. You brought up a couple of things that I probably would kind of agree with you on. I think it's more complicated. If you want to call it a left and right issue, when the right only says it's money printing, I kind of disagree with that. So I think it's a combination of supply and demand within a given market infrastructure that could also be manipulated. I think absolutely agreeing with you. I think oil and energy absolutely could play in that again. And again, I could argue that could be manipulated. And a hot take for me that both the left and the right is going to hate me on, I'm not so sure that the lower income wage earners and some of the challenges we're seeing with that now and the stimulus checks and all that, they're not saving money, they're spending. And that could also create an issue in supply and demand in quote unquote, a given market infrastructure. So I think it's complicated, including what we're dealing with now at our deficit with inflation, with rising interest rates. Is the Fed going to cut in September, which they likely will? We're heading into the presidential election. I think this is a very complex issue, but to ignore money printing, which is not backed by anything, it's backed by nothing but the full faith and credit. This is a problem happening around the world, but specifically in the US and the West, it is completely unacceptable. And I look at it as a major problem. The only thing why it's not even worse than the so-called major problem that I called it is the US dollar is the world reserve currency. So maybe it's a land of one-eyed giants and we're kind of the one-eyed giant, but what happens when we can't meet that debt service? What happens with the advent of the BRICS? What happens with the rise of China? And now we're going to be heading into more of a multipolar world, let alone singular to US and Bretton Woods or the US and China. And I think this is going to get complicated. I'm about 30 seconds short. I'm going to stop it. And technically for now, if needed, we have 6 minutes to go back and forth.
Okay. You would like to see constraints on the US money printing and government expenditures. I would say that's the equivalent of your rib cage being solid, not being able to expand. A rib cage that cannot expand and contract is a gold-backed currency. You want your economy, you want your monetary system to be able to inflate and deflate so as to mitigate the harm of behavioral economics, how people feel about the economy, the currency, and so on and so forth. Now, you are acting as if the dollar is a zero-sum game, and you're acting as if your personal finances the government should abide by the constraints of your personal finances. That is not true. You want the government to spend money into the economy because it benefits the economy when the economy is stagnant, and you want the economy and you want the government to get out of the economy and the markets when the markets are functioning and are roaring. That way the government doesn't stymie the growth and innovation of the markets and the economy. Essentially, what we're discussing here is Keynesian versus monetarist. The problem really here is that modern monetary theory is what answers why we've been printing money and we have not seen appropriate or related inflation. So quite simply, modern monetary theory essentially says the value of the dollar is defined by the marginal productivity of the government's dollar's expenditure. So if the government prints money and gives it to the general public to smooth out the harms of the COVID pandemic, and the general public spends their money online on Wayfair and Amazon, then it causes a dislocation in the consumer economy, which causes inflation in consumer goods. But when the federal government prints money and quantitative easing and does a toxic asset relief program to restore and maintain faith in the American economic system, and there isn't a related inflation. So what happened between September of 2008 and March of 2009 rivaled 1929. But what happened between March of 2009 and December of 2009 has never happened in any market anywhere in the world, ever in history, in 12 months, let alone 9, which is that the Dow Jones went from below 6,500 to above 10,500, which is a rally of 66%. And that is the market reacting to the government intervening in the markets and reacting very positively. It restored faith in the markets and the economy. Hence, that's why I believe money printing and liberal fiscal and economic policies are beneficial to markets and the economy.
Well, I'm glad you have the guts to take that unique position, Giovanni. And again, I'm listening, you're causing me to think, and I'm going to need to learn more, but I'm going to disagree. The fact that we're looking at how are we going to deal with a $35 trillion in growing deficit? How are we dealing with $1 trillion in debt service? What is going to address that? We have major
I'll tell you
problems. Well,
I'll tell you how.
This
bankruptcy.
Goes on. Okay.
Bankruptcy.
Yeah, we are not going to meet our treasury obligations. The hell with the world. Let's do a reset. So that's a good answer.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that supposedly when someone goes bankrupt, they can never get access to credit. It's completely untrue. When you declare personal bankruptcy, within 6 months, not even a year, within 6 months, some credit card company is going to send you a credit card because you have a propensity for credit, you have no more credit, and you definitely have the means to pay it off. So wiping out American deficit would be beneficial not only to America, but to the rest of the world. And very importantly, the rest of the world cannot play economic war with America. If China doesn't buy our debt or whatever, then America just won't buy Chinese goods and services. Reducing the debt payment.
Our goods, including pharmaceutical, until we get that corrected here in the U.S. Giovanni, your dog is disagreeing with you. It's basically saying, what the hell are you talking about? Listen to the other Italian guy there named Angelo. So the U.S. going bankrupt is absolutely a horrific idea. That would cause the world to be in utter turmoil. It's horrific. We need okay, we'll have our final 30 seconds, although I think I already had my verbiage there. This goes back to the whole issue of big government. I'm probably less so a traditional quote unquote Republican or conservative. I'm not. I'm open-minded. I voted for both parties in my 30 plus years of voting. I skew to libertarian policies. Hopefully your dog will agree. And I don't like the fact that the state has a monopoly, which I know is going to sound off track, effectively on violence, police and military, on fiscal policy. They could print money. I can't. This is unacceptable. Everyone is kicking the can down the road. I don't like it. Do I have a great solution for it? No, but I find this to be unacceptable, and we need to start to address it now. And I think the issue on energy that you noted, on drill, which we may get to later, on fiscal policy, on supply and demand, we need to address these issues now with incredible toughness and discipline. And some people aren't going to like it because we all have to take our medicine to address this issue. Final word is yours.
We agree that there is a problem, though I think we disagree as to how big of a problem it is. You believe that we should cut off our nose to spite our own face right now, fiscal austerity, but fiscal austerity will just harm America's economic growth. If you really are concerned about America's fiscal state, please do not vote for politicians who are buying your votes by cutting taxes. You keep arguing that government expenditures is buying votes from the middle class, blue collar worker, when in reality, I think that cutting taxes is even more so literally buying votes from the middle class and blue collar worker. We should be returning to a tax basis similar to that of Bill Clinton or even Ronald Reagan. Well, Bill Clinton's presidency with Newt Gingrich balanced the budget. George Bush bought votes with tax cuts, and so did Donald Trump. Once you cut taxes to people, it's very difficult to bring back those taxes. The Republican Party is undermining America's fiscal security. Last point, American debt has only been downgraded once by one ratings agency, only because the Republican Party was playing chicken with the debt ceiling. Never has America's debt been downgraded for any liberal or democratic policy.
I did promise Giovanni the last word. I'm going to stick to it, but I'm going to bite my tongue. On that note, we now move to the third subject, which you may find a little offensive that I'm taking on. You're the one literally from Europe, and I'm the one who's going to be leading the discussion talking about it, and definitely going to be interested in your rebuttal. Everyone, this is probably the time for putting on the seatbelt. Here we go. Okay, so the issue is Europe, culture, immigration, I could argue NATO, entrepreneurship. The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and get rid of their own understanding of their history. Decadence grows weak, and effectively new factions, in my opinion, start to come out. A great society is only built, like I said earlier, when the most qualified are inspired and desire to contribute. Now, there's a whole bunch of issues in Europe. One of them that's leading to immigration is effectively the issue with they're just not having enough kids. Now, we're having some of that in the US, definitely Japan and other countries. It's a Western thing. From the perspective of evolution, mating, not survival, mating is actually, quote unquote, the name of the game. So they're what? Bringing in immigrants to, quote unquote, replace you? What's the policy for what they're doing, bringing them in? And what's happening to European culture? When I go there and I look at what's happening in the UK, in France, in Germany, it's shocking. I mean, I'm going to use that word. Don't say that I haven't been there, because I have. Germany has no growth for multiple years. The business model is based on what? Cheap energy from Russia. That's not going to work. Wicked demographics are hitting them at home, uncontrolled immigration, and issues relative to housing. Now, I could get to major issues in Europe with bureaucracy. We think it's bad here in the US. It is way worse there. And a little bit of the lack of getting up from the ground, starting companies, failing, and doing it again and again until you get it right. The so-called American spirit, I find, is gravely lacking in much of Europe. I could argue there may be some exceptions in Poland and Turkey. We're probably not going to quite have enough time to get to that. And you're telling me in the UK, which looks like a disaster to me, that Sir Mark Rowley, the police commissioner, is threatening if they don't like your social media post, that they're going to put you in jail. And now they want to come here, or put in that word, the threat, come here to America. We don't like what you say. We're going to put you in jail. Look at what happened with the gentleman from Telegram in France. Terrible. That's a lack of free speech. I don't like it at all. Much of Europe, specifically Western Europe, has gone totally woke. And I think it may be too late for them. It may be too late. We're not too late here in the US. Without a unifying morality, societies fall apart. Yes, I know I'm going to sound a little off track here. I believe in a soul. I believe in God. I believe in unifying morality that keeps our culture together. And I look at all the challenges that I see in Europe, let alone the fact they don't have the natural resources that we have here in the US. They have major challenges with energy. Their militaries have gone to crap. It's utterly embarrassing, with the exception perhaps of Poland and Turkey. And speaking of Turkey, What happens if Israel goes to war with Iran and real war breaks out in the Middle East? Is Turkey going to leave NATO? Are they going to, with a pretty massive and impressive army, going to be impacted? This is what leads to global war. So the question is the economy an illusion? To me, it's an illusion here in the US. It is way worse in Europe. By the way, great architecture, great people, great food. They're always so friendly to me. And I enjoy so much of European culture. I guess half or more of my heritage is from there. I want to see Europe succeed. I'm just looking at it from my experience, seeing problem after problem after problem, and it's embarrassing and a disgrace. I finished early. Shocking.
Okay. You are saying that Europe has problems and it is caused by immigration.
Well, it's caused by woke policy, and part of that is immigration without being careful on immigration. That's a part of it. Part of it, yes.
Okay.
And major demographics.
Europe has problems, and it has less problems today, or it has different problems today than it had years ago. Okay, so I remember I grew up in South Kensington and Chelsea. If I had told my mother I wanted to go to a Chelsea football game, my mother would have had a conniption. I mean, she literally would have said, "No way can you go to a Chelsea football game," and she wouldn't be hyperventilating to think that I might die. Chelsea was one of the most violent fans. And for years, I don't think it was just for 2 or 3 years, I think for a decade, England club soccer was banned from international travel. At least their fans were. For a while, literally the team wasn't allowed to travel internationally. But then after a while, I think club teams were allowed to travel internationally, but the fans were not. Okay, number one. Number two, the problems that Europe faces pale in comparison to the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, with communist revolutionaries that were prevalent in Europe, the Baader Meinhof in Germany, the Brigati Rossi in Italy, the Basque separatists in Spain, the IRA in England. Europe doesn't have those problems today. If you look at countries like England, which has a lot of Indians and Pakistanis in their borders, that stems from the fact that they had the English Empire, and British Rail said to Indians and Pakistanis, if you would like to work in British Rail, you must come to England, apply for a job, and then potentially get a job. That is how so many Indians and Pakistanis moved to England. It's through a visa program saying, I'm applying for a job. So England was far more diverse in its sort of population than other European nations were before the European Union. And now, the chickens are coming home to roost. France is dealing with issues with Algerians and Moroccans. Italy is dealing with issues with Somalis and Ethiopians. These are all European colonialism where the chickens are coming home to roost. And quite frankly, the fact that there is less ethnocentrism, less homogeneity within these countries does not mean that there are problems. The problems are, these are breathing problems, they're teething problems, they're growing problems that Europe is dealing with. And I would say that the influx of these populations don't come without problems. I agree that there are problems inherent in the assimilation of different cultures into Europe, but quite simply, England is the test case. Europe has Brexited, and I would say that there are quite a few, not the majority, but quite a few of those people who voted to leave Europe in England who now regret that decision. There is no society. You say that societies break apart because of a loss of a common culture and so on and so forth. I would disagree. There are plenty of societies that fall apart with homogeneity. The Incas fell apart, and I would say that German Nazis became more homogeneous and ethnocentric, and their culture completely fell apart. So I disagree with the premise of your problem.
Okay, we're in our 6-minute stage now where we'll go a little back and forth. I'll come back to some of that. I guess I could ask the question, and I don't perfectly know the answer. I didn't look it up. How many Fortune 500 companies, the world's largest companies, have originated since 1960? That's older than me, in Europe. It is very, very, very few. Now, admittingly, if Stripe goes public, if Anthropic, the AI company, yes. And trust me, I want to see Europe succeed. I want to see good things happen there. There are major, major problems. You didn't address some of the issues that I brought up. And okay, you're going to say the police commissioner is a bit of a whack job. Like, he's going to come here and arrest Americans. Well, he's already doing it locally relative to some things that I see in the UK, relative to what people are posting on social media. How about the now, I know we may get to energy separately, the energy issue, the resources. There are grave challenges without potentially the growth from companies that at least we have some potential here in the US. We have fish on both sides of the ocean. We have, let's go with the word, friendly neighbors here in the US. We have size, we have scale, we have law, we have Silicon Valley, we have the US military, we have resources, we have the Mississippi River, which leads to great farming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I see more challenges in Europe, and I don't think the issues that I brought up, including now, you politely just ignored them.
I'm sorry, which issues are you talking about? I'm saying
I start. A lack of entrepreneurship, resources somewhat constraint, a cancel culture, an overly woke governmental system.
Okay. So let's just go with a lack of entrepreneurship. There's plenty of entrepreneurship in Europe. Europe's economic values are not beholden to entrepreneurship. Quality of life is extremely important to Europeans in a way that it is not in America. That is why healthcare and life expectancy is greater in Europe than it is in America.
Europe's a broad term in certain countries.
So by and large, Ericsson was founded in Europe. There's many.
Yeah, there's some.
There is some, but Europeans don't have the same reverence for entrepreneurship that America has. It's just a cultural value. Those people who, and I would say the OECD actually ranks America below many European countries for social mobility. So this is why we need to use charts, and we can look things up on the internet whilst we're discussing it. But the OECD does not rank America as, above all countries, the leading country in economic mobility, or for an environment that fosters startup culture and entrepreneurship. There are plenty of startups in Europe in entrepreneurship in Europe.
I mean, I've been there, and yes, it is way more bureaucratic. And you're bringing up some level of statistics that we each could bring up, because statistics, depending on how hard we look, are going to push our point of view. And especially if it's coming from academia, I'm sorry, I'm going back to, again, it's not 20 years ago. I do not totally trust it. That doesn't mean I may not have some respect for it. That doesn't mean I don't want to learn from it. I just question the reality. And their issues relative to, and we may talk about this in energy and oil, very green. And again, nothing ever said about India and China. Let's leave them alone. Greta doesn't talk about that. It's only, quote, the US is the big bad wolf. So I see a lot of challenges and problems. And the fact that it's acceptable to even question that you could go to a different country and put someone in jail for their social media post. And we saw some of it play out in France, in my perspective, when he went there with the founder of Telegram. Are you telling me it's not possible not possible that Elon could be traveling in Europe and potentially be arrested. That is an utter disgrace.
Well, to quote Shakespeare, I think you're making much ado about nothing. But in any case, I would say that liberals are probably making much ado about nothing about Donald Trump when they say that he's going to become a dictator. Only Trump is actually literally saying he wants to become a dictator, or he'll be a dictator day one. In any case, there is zero oversight or censorship over mass media is what you're arguing for. And I think the general public does believe that there should be some censorship, some control, some accountability of the media.
If the general public feels that, then they're an idiot. And that would be maybe a difference between America and how other people feel around the world. Now, maybe
I agree with you
on personal freedoms and rights. Maybe it's just me. Maybe you're right, Giovanni. Like, I really don't know, but that's, I don't even have a great, I'm shocked. Like, that's, yes, who's deciding who is censoring? Who's doing the cancel culture? This is just utterly unacceptable to me, and I would never want to live in a country like that.
Let's not confuse cancel culture with censorship, okay? Cancel culture is when consumers of their free will decide to no longer economically reward people or theories that they disagree with. That's not censorship. What the police commissioner, the Metropolitan Police, is advocating is in fact censorship, and it is a slippery slope. And I do disagree with you. I do agree with you that we should be very concerned that the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police would make such a authoritarian, one world, order government statement. But he made it.
That. The left wants that. The left wants that. And one day,
I disagree. I disagree. The restrictions of our rights, our liberties, our privacy is primarily the result of the right. The Patriot Act, yes, the Patriot Act, the patriotism, our belief in government, right? These are all America was shocked when it got slapped across the face and it had, the September 11th terrorism attack. It was shocking to the rest of the world because it was huge, but America has not really dealt with terrorism the way the rest of the world has. Where Lord Mountbatten was blown up by the IRA, where the mafia blew a hole 30 foot wide on a highway that had Giovanni Falcone driving down. Yes. He was an investigative judge. Terrorism, Europe has problems that America cannot fathom. America had a problem that Europe couldn't fathom either, which was the Bloods and the Crips, which again, don't really, we don't have drive-by shootings anymore. Now we have white kids, primarily white kids, individual shooters shooting up high schools. But I would say that the problems that you are identifying in Europe pale in comparison to the problems that Europe has had in the past. They've overcome those problems. I'm confident they'll overcome the problems you have identified.
I'll take the final 30 to 45 seconds on this one, then I'll kick it off to you for energy. I believe it was Murray Rothbard to the effect of, why do people obey the government? People tend to enslave themselves, to let themselves be governed by tyrants, because it's easier to put faith in someone else in order to, quote unquote, the chaos of your life. Your life is your responsibility. We believe, or I do, in personal freedoms and opportunity. I don't want a handout. Now, that doesn't mean that I may not need help from my family, from my community. And you mentioned the word bankruptcy earlier. There are some times when here in America, that does allow you to, quote unquote, have a clean slate. Now, we could argue, and I know that's adapted in the last 10 or 20 years, but this creates the opportunity. There's so many different things here, from Zuckerberg admitting that our government forced his censorship of real news. Now, I know we're not going to make this a Trump versus Harris. Maybe in October, as we get closer to the election, you and I could do something relative to that, something relative to family offices. I know we have some unique opinions on a variety of different subjects. I just, again, I'm looking at what's going on around the world. I mentioned with France, with Pavel, in terms of arresting him. I don't like that. And Brazil, which I know is not Europe, but banning X and censorship and limiting political opponents. The UK arrest that I noted earlier. Maybe all I see is problems. Maybe I need to be more of an optimist. So over a glass of wine, Giovanni, with your dog meeting my dog, maybe we can make that happen. Okay, I believe we're on to the final subject. And by the way, I don't know if we're going to disagree at all, but we probably will. Let's see where it goes. I'm going to leave energy, oil, green, whatever you want to go down to. You're on the clock.
I believe we have passed peak oil. I believe that energy is becoming more valuable. It's becoming more scarce. The price of energy is going down only because we are extracting more oil out of the ground. I think Saudi Arabia has passed peak oil as well, which is why when Biden went to Saudi Arabia and asked Mohammed bin Salman to increase supply, the excuse Mohammed bin Salman gave was, I kind of like Donald Trump, and so I don't want to help you. Then, Biden came back and then opened up the strategic oil reserves and then deflated the price of oil. But America is now a net energy exporter. Liberal and democratic governments are not really restrictive on the oil industry. And I would say that America is making a mistake by focusing so much on oil. It really should switch over to gas if it wants to be in the fossil fuel business or in the fossil fuel powered economy. Europe uses natural gas for trucks, trains, boats, home heating. America barely uses natural gas, barely. Nearly all buses in Europe are, if they're fossil fueled, they're powered by natural gas. Europe doesn't really have any natural gas. It had sources of natural gas through the Nord Stream pipeline. Liberal economic policies where you trade between nations for each other's resources. That is an elitist philosophy that did not pan out. Russia did, in fact, threaten that economic tie. Europe thought that there was going to be rolling brownouts when they didn't have access to natural gas, but clearly the fossil fuel industry has adapted, and there have been, I don't think, any brownouts in Europe as a result of a scarcity of natural gas coming through the pipeline. So my goal here is really to explain to Americans that wanting a energy policy that is geared towards green or renewable is merely a policy that prevents an over-reliance on fossil fuels that is getting more and more scarce. We are not finding any new sources of fossil fuels. We're only getting better at extracting fossil fuels out of the ground. And that is why energy prices are down, but we have passed peak oil.
Okay, you were under. There he is. He's cheering you on, Giovanni, this time. I'm getting that vibe. And to some degree, perhaps I am too. I don't know if I really totally disagree, but I'll bring up a couple of points. Peak oil, I don't quite know about that, but I do know that there's enough oil with, again, fracking and things like that to likely last for decade after decade after decade after decade. when you factor in gas, and I agree we should be more proactive with that, coupled with quote unquote green initiatives. I am not against, I am pro green initiatives, but to assume that we're going to run this country manufacturing our military and the fact that how valuable oil and gas is and just stop that is absolutely nonsense. That is not going to happen, and that should not happen. Over time, things are going to get better and better with green. I'm going to and absolutely build nuclear, obviously safe, but I think that's going to be very valuable as well. I think a lot of this comes down to what I said earlier, supply and demand, specifically within what I would define as a market infrastructure. Now, if you want to look forward with the work that I've done in AI and the people that I know, and the reality is, none of us have a crystal ball. I guarantee you, God forbid, unless we have nuclear war or something goes terribly wrong, AI is advancing very, very quickly. It's going to hit the point in probably 3 years of AGI, and it's going to artificial general intelligence, and probably within 2 to 4 years after that, reach what's known as super intelligence, where effectively it is so much smarter than collectively probably all of us as a human species are. It is going to be able to solve for fusion energy, which is going to be dynamic and game-changing, and might be one of the answers to the issue with our massive deficit and the challenges that we're having with GDP and all that. Now, that's going to combine AI with robotics, longevity, biomedicines. There's going to be... Now, I'm not going down the negative road. There's a lot that could go wrong there, but this is not a discussion that we're doing on that. Listen to some of my other programming relative to that. So I actually think within 10, 12, 15 years, we're actually going to have a lot of this solved. I'm glad you didn't overly go down the green road like I think lots in Europe have done. And what I see about saying bad things about Europe and the US and nothing, just keeping your mouth shut about India and China and all the quote unquote polluting that they're doing. So we may disagree a little bit here or there, but I think we're relatively on the same page. I don't even know if it's worthy of a little back and forth, but maybe on this one, I'll give you the final closing commentary.
I would say I'm very concerned about conservative rhetoric. I think that by and large, Republicans and conservatives have been completely divorced from the truth, starting from when George Bush went to Iraq and said there was weapons of mass destruction, which there were not. That George Bush was reelected after being wrong about the premise for going to war in Iraq by painting John Kerry as a flip-flopper, even though John Kerry won medals of valor and Purple Hearts, so getting harmed in combat. How a war hero was painted as a pussy relative to a guy who is in the Air National Guard. That is incredible political propaganda manipulation. Then moving on to when the Republican Party questioned whether Barack Obama was a U.S. citizen by virtue of where he was born.
No disrespect, Giovanni, but what does this have to do with the part of our discussion now?
Let me get there.
Okay.
I believe that conservative and Republican philosophies and policies, no one's calling them to the mat. They're wrong. Conservatives and Republicans are just comfortable being completely divorced from reality and flat out arriving at conclusions based upon incorrect facts. Facts such as the Biden administration or Democrats inhibit oil production. It's completely untrue. The facts prove that American oil production is greater in these last 4 years than they were during the Trump administration. So I believe that Republicans traffic in fear-mongering, arrive at the wrong conclusion based upon the wrong set of facts. And all I'm saying is that, and by using Barack Obama and George Bush. I was laying the groundwork for the fact that is my opinion, that Republicans are fiscally wrong on many issues. They arrive at the wrong conclusions because they believe the wrong set of facts as a premise.
Well, I'm sure Giovanni thinks that, of course, Harrison Waltz is going to be a great ticket. We'll save that one for October, so we got to leave the audience hanging a little bit. My comment on that from my perspective is I'm truly independent. There are some times when I probably agree more with the so-called Democratic side and sometimes more with the Republican side. I would say Giovanni's probably a little bit more 99% strongly aligned with his perspective, being what I would call anti-so-called conservative and Republican, or at least the current Republican Party. Now, if you want to debate Trump and Harris, we'll do that in October. If you want to debate the future of the Republican Party after Trump, those are all very fair questions where there's some concerns that I myself would have about leadership rising in the party. And don't get me wrong, I don't want one side, like I felt the left, which is maybe a modest percentage of Democrats, probably ballpark about 10% of them, that went way overboard with what I define as woke, which is not to the betterment of this country and not to the betterment of the world. It's not the principles of personal freedoms that I believe is Americana down to its core. And that's important for me and at least important to many of the people that I know. But I know that I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm imperfect. New information comes in. I need to be adaptable. My experience is what you define as right-leaning and conservative. I actually find them more commonly than not to be more open-minded than so-called people on what I would define as the far left. They are completely closed-minded. You can't talk to them at all. They're caught up in their ideology, and it's complete and utter nonsense. And academia, big tech, Hollywood is extremely left-leaning. And you want to bring up statistics, something like 90% plus of their charitable contributions are to Democratic causes. Now, you could argue, well, maybe Wall Street's more conservative. I don't know about that. 20 years ago, probably, I think that has switched too. I think we have a powder keg that is happening in this country and around the world that we're probably not going to have a time to, Giovanni, those will be maybe three topics, including the election, that we can leave into October. Maybe I'll give you a chance for a parting comment before I note some programming notes that maybe tie some of these things together out of respect for you being a guest and coming on. And by the way, I am not ultra high IQ. I work hard, and I know amazing people that I've earned from the ground up, one by one, the hard way. I may have strong opinions, but I'd like to hope they're loosely held. As new information comes in, I may need, like playing a game of poker, to change my mind. I appreciate Giovanni coming on because the reality is the majority of people that I approach on, let's rock the boat a little bit in our community and do somewhat of a debate, they want no part of it. They're not comfortable with open disagreement where maybe our voices are raised a little bit. They don't want to hear from the other side. Their mind is totally made up, totally. But on that note, before I do my close, Giovanni, relative to this debate and friendly conversation, what would be your parting comments?
My parting comments is that you are concerned about 10% of the left, and I am concerned about at least 66, if not 80% of the right, which is that 66 or 80% of Trump supporters, of Republicans are Trump supporters. These are people who say they back the blue, they respect law and order, America first, and yet Trump has co-opted the party and turned it into a cult of personality. He's unconstitutional. We should already be in a post-Trump Republican Party. The Republicans had Trump, or Trump was on his knees. He was on his back on the mat after the inauguration, the Republican Party resuscitated him because each individual member found it in their best interests to be associated with Donald Trump.
And
I voted for Donald Trump. I voted for Donald Trump in 2016 because I thought he was. I thought Hillary Clinton would be a horrific president.
You would be correct about that.
Okay, I think that America is not the TV show Game of Thrones, where the throne is passed between the Bushes and the Clintons with a short interlude or a long interlude with Barack Obama. Okay, but philosophically, I was opposed to Hillary Clinton on that instance, and I think that Hillary Clinton's email issue is a true reflection as to who she really is, which is that she thinks that she's above the law and that she has no trust in the American judicial system and the political system. She feels victimized the way Donald Trump feels victimized. And what people do when they feel put upon, when they feel like a victim, they lash out. And it is not beneficial to anybody when you have someone who feels victimized in a position of leadership and power. And for that reason, I voted for Donald Trump. I did not vote for him in 2020. I will not vote for him in 2024, but I'm surprised. I would say that if you vote for Donald Trump today, I'm not saying you should vote for Kamala Harris, but if you vote for Donald Trump, you are voting for him. You're voting for a protectionist person who starts trade wars with China that America does not win. It harms America. What's surprising is that China's response to Trump's trade war was targeted to Trump states, which is why I think that inflation and the economy is so weak in Louisiana, Iowa, Oklahoma, and so on and so forth, and is doing so rather well in New York and California and so on and so forth. China targeted American agribusiness and all industries that were in majorly Republican states. So Trump has not made America great again. Factually, you can compare how the economy did under Trump, how it did under Barack Obama, how it's doing under Biden. I think that Trump can be faulted for how he responded to COVID, but yes. But it's a political management philosophy that he had, which was to sort of ignore it, sweep it under the rug. He thought it would go away. He was wrong. He was mistaken. Okay. Nonetheless, he was the president of the United States of America. Okay. But I think that Biden, given a Congress that is the most ineffective Congress that a president has probably ever had in history, has achieved surprising legislative successes, such as the Green New Deal, labeled as the Inflation Reduction Act. It is amazing that such an unpopular piece of legislation by the Republican Party got passed, and has not been rescinded the same way Obamacare has not been rescinded either. So I think that Biden is a surprisingly effective, I'm not saying good, effective president, given the legislative and political landscape that he became president in.
Well, I'm gonna change the goalpost a little bit, make a comment to your comment, and I promise I'll give you the final minute before I close. What you're being very specific and leaving out certain things. President Biden, you look at him now versus when he was elected in 2020, you can watch his gait, you can hear him talk, you can look at him. It is absolutely not the same person. And it's sad. I'm not saying that from any sort of gloating perspective. I felt very, very sorry for him at the debate. That being said, who is running this country? It's supposed to be people that we vote for, like Biden. Apparently, it's a cabal. So you're talking about people that, oh, Biden, you didn't say great, but you said effective president. Apparently, it's a collective, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 of people in deep state in the Democratic Party. So that brings up a whole bigger point, and we'll get to this more around election time in October, relative to Harris not winning any quote unquote primary anyway. There's a whole bunch of things we could get into. I don't know. And I wouldn't have thought this even on J6, but now I'm having doubts. I don't know if Trump will be allowed to win. We saw the assassination attempt on him. And if the powers that be, which is really the true powers that be, they want presidential candidates acceptable to their world order, and we're not voting for them. That's the sad part about it. Is democracy really an illusion? Now, I could go back to a comment that I said earlier. Do most people want true freedoms? No, I do, but they don't want that responsibility that brings on. They want the deep state to quote unquote take care of them. That's unacceptable to me. I'd rather die. I need freedom. And I'm no young buck, so I may die anyway. But that's just me. So I hear what you're saying. Do I think Trump is an honorable man of incredible character? No. Are there things that concern me about Trump? Yes. And I've said that publicly, and I said that in my family office conversations. I have to make a very difficult decision, and I'll do so because I know will be the right decision for this country come November. But I really did promise you the last word before I do my close, which will have nothing to do with our commentary, just more about things upcoming. So on that note, I now kick it back to you. No matter what you say, I'm not going to get riled up and come in with changing the goalpost again. I promise.
Okay. I understand your concerns about Trump's mental decline, but I will just remind you.
Biden.
Sorry, Biden. Well, they both have mental decline.
I knew.
But I would say Biden does make decisions, maybe slowly. I don't believe that there is a cabal that's telling Biden what to do. No one would dare to do that in America.
Yes, well, they do.
Hold on. Okay. Biden is a president the way Ronald Reagan was, especially after his assassination, and how influential Nancy Reagan was. So I think that the Democrats in the White House were just reacting the way, the White House staff were with Ronald Reagan. They would just win one for the Kipper. Okay. So they treated Reagan, and they're treating Biden as an elder statesman. But I do believe that Biden makes decisions slowly, thoughtfully, rationally. But I do not believe. Now, I'll end with one last point, okay? I don't believe that there are conspiracies in America. There is too much money to be made in revealing the truth, okay? If an FBI agent who is sworn to secrecy reveals the dirty little secrets of the White House, and of all the names he's known by the most famous porn movie in the world, Deep Throat. If that FBI agent reveals the dirty little secrets of what's happening in the White House, next point, if the Navy SEALs, right? SEAL Team 6, to become a Navy SEAL Team 6 operator, you have to spend 6 months in BUDS, 6 months in special training. That's 1 year. Then a minimum of 2 years in an individual team. Then you can go to SEAL Team 6 training, which is about 6 months. And then another sort of 6 months in training. You can be operational in SEAL Team 6 no sooner than 4 years of infiltration in military ideology and procedures and so on and so forth. And one thing that is very important to the Navy SEALs is we share the credit, we share the blame. And yet we know who shot Osama bin Laden, because the 3 operators that entered into Osama bin Laden's room, They argue over which of the three shot Osama bin Laden. All three have revealed their identities by writing books about who shot Osama bin Laden. So I do not believe that conspiracies such as that Biden is a puppet can operate in America, because if it were remotely true, right? Because the accusation that he is a puppet is revealed to the world. There are no insiders within the White House that are revealing the truth that he is a puppet. Whereas when Donald Trump was president, you had that guy who was the chief of staff to Homeland Security, who wrote anonymously that he is a member of the resistance within the White House. Never before has a president had a cabinet and a White House that thought it was doing its job trying to constrain the president from coloring outside the lines and causing harm to America. You don't see that within the Biden administration.
Yeah, because they're all quote unquote behind it. But I did promise I would keep my mouth quiet. My God, I had to deal with this. Although Giovanni had to deal with me. And by the way, if Giovanni and I were face to face now, we'd break out the arms, give a bro hug. I actually saw him in Newport, Rhode Island. I hope I did give you a bro hug, Giovanni. And I will absolutely buy you a drink. For me, probably beer. For you, wine. But if you want to meet in the middle and maybe go scotch or brandy, I could be kind of down for that too. So again, I think this is good. And this is important, that although we didn't 100% disagree, but we're probably about 75 to 80% different, there's a time when that's important and you discuss it and you know when to let it go and how to have a personal relationship. There's so much more to it. Our dogs, our family, etc. Good food, good drink, to me, a good cigar, etc. So on that note, first of all, I'd like to thank Giovanni, where there's nothing in it for him. He has nothing to offer, nothing to sell. If anything, it may be a little bit more of a negative for him to be somewhat relatively public, although on my platform, it's really not that public. I wish I had millions of followers. But I greatly appreciate that, unlike the others that are either too ignorant or too afraid. And by the way, on the other subjects, I'm a notch out of my wheelhouse here. I'm a single family office guy. I want to talk about creating a family office, the value of a family office, practice management, best practices. That's where I could say I maybe have a little bit of chops that I could go back and forth on. People that disagree with my unique opinions there, they just, outside of McLaughlin, so far, they just don't want to come on. They think you need to have billions of dollars to have a single family office. They think you need to use Wall Street. They think you need to invest actively in 2 and 20 managers. All of that is complete nonsense. And if you feel otherwise and you want to come on here and debate me, I can't say I could take every comer on because I got to limit it to 2 or 3 programs I do a week. But I'm interested, so feel free to reach out. Around the realm of what I talk about is geopolitics, economics, and investing. But today, these were subjects that are like one notch removed from that. I'm an amateur at it. I'm just a simple old country boy with a Wyoming cowboy hat and cigar. What the hell do I know? So it's great to have a chance to learn from Giovanni, maybe 1 or 2 things. And again, I look to do more of these. I know this is very untraditional to what most of you are used to in the family office world. You're used to a 30-minute discussion. It's boring as boring can be. It never touches on anything relative to political or deeper on economics or investing, really. And it's kind of a generic conversation. I'm sorry if that ostracizes me from the community. Well, I've been in that ostracized for a number of years. I probably actually seem to like it. I don't need to be an expert. I want to have long and interesting discussions. I'm curious. I'm a truth seeker, and I fail at that sometimes. I'm imperfect. But if you don't mind the fact that I'm a little out of the ordinary, that I like to have unique discussions, I hope you enjoy and subscribe to my two YouTube channels. One is at Family Office. The other is at Family Office TV. You could reach out to me at angelorobles.com. You could figure out and email me from there. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn. Giovanni, I don't know if you had anything. Maybe it's a philanthropic initiative. Maybe it's some of your socials that you wanted to know for our audience that would like to, like they will with me. I'll get a little bit of love, but I'll probably get some hate text and DMs as well. So I don't know if you want to throw yourself out there, but if you do, is there any comment or anything you'd like to share?
I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss this on your platform. I really wish there were more people who would discuss what they truly feel, what they truly think about the economy and the markets and so on and so forth. I really think that we are in an environment, probably always been the case, but it's affecting me now, where people are scared to say the wrong thing, and the consequences of what might happen when they say the wrong thing. And I just, I'm much more comfortable. I have much more of an agenda, in fact, within family offices, because I would say that my family office, my mother, the estate, has been ethically and professionally managed into poverty. That is, that everyone has done an ethical and professional job. The results have been rather horrific. That is because they call themselves conservative, so they don't take risks.
There he goes again.
No, they don't take risks. And as a result, the wealth has been eroding because the investments have not kept pace with inflation. No one has done an unprofessional, unethical job. There really aren't any members of the family that have pissed away their wealth, let's say. So, wealth and health are dissimilar in the sense that no matter what you do over time, you will lose your health. Wealth is not the case. Wealth can accumulate, compound, and outgrow your spending habits. So if you restrict your spending habits and you invest in such a way that grows the wealth over time, then you can maintain your wealth and grow it beyond your lifetime. And so if I have an agenda, if I have, let's say, a philanthropic cause, it is to push back and to mitigate against all those professionals within the family office that are more motivated by career risk avoidance than they are motivated by being results orientated. 10% return investment is better than 8% return investment. And anybody who makes themselves feel better about an 8% return investment as opposed to 10% return investment by saying that they're conservatively invested. If conservative investing were half as good as it seems, you would have had people in 2009 and 10, 11 saying, oh, this market crash isn't affecting us. We're conservatively invested. So if I have an agenda, that agenda is to shake the shackles off that restrain, that constrain an investor from achieving and desiring better results. That is my agenda.
Wow. For a change here, I completely agree. And that was some of the points I made in my debate with McLaughlin. I would love to do more debates with those in the industry. They just don't want any part of this, even though they're probably smarter than me. But it's not all about smart. It's about being right. And you noted, and I've said for years, that it's to my detriment because it gets me in more trouble, that a non-bloodline executive with no skin in the game, by the very nature, depending on the family, their age, and their part of their career, is likely going to be overly conservative. It's the safer bet. It's like a frog in boiling water. You don't notice it at first. And when you factor in inflation for the rich, which is often higher than so-called in here in the US, the CPI, coupled with taxes, coupled with distributions, I would even argue that over time, generation to generation, I'm not so sure that even 10% is going to be enough. So the opportunity of being strategic, in my opinion, owning and controlling privately held companies and taking more calculated risk. We don't have the time to get into this, Giovanni, but that is a subject where we're totally totally on the same team. And I do look forward to having those discussions with you, both on and off the record. And anyone out there that would like to have these kind of discussions, reach out to me. Again, I can't take all comers on, but at minimal, I'll probably have a 15, 20-minute call with you. You know why? Because damn it, assuming my time allows it, maybe, just maybe I could learn something. So I appreciate you, Giovanni. I learned so much. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for coming on, and have a great evening. Thank you.
You too. Excellent, Sam.